It was Nevada, early summer of 1992, out on the test range where the land looks dead even in daylight. At night, it felt worse. Empty, flat, quiet in a way that presses on your ears. I was assigned there as part of a joint task force, Navy security attached to a Department of Energy detail. On paper, it was routine site support, escort duty, access control. Nothing that would ever show up in a history book. That's what they told us. The deeper we went into that place, the clearer it became that whatever was happening under the desert had nothing to do with maintenance, testing, or safety upgrades. Something had already been there long before we arrived, and the site existed to keep it where it was. Before I go further, I need to explain why I remember this as clearly as I do. I've always kept notes, not personal journals, logs, times, locations, small details that most people forget. It's a habit you pick up when you're responsible for other people's lives. You don't rely on memory alone. You write things down. That's the only reason this still makes sense to me now. I was 34 at the time, petty officer first class, Navy security, nothing exotic. I wasn't intelligence, and I wasn't special operations. My clearance covered procedures, not explanations. My job was to guard people who were more important than me and make sure no one wandered where they weren't supposed to be. The Nevada test site didn't look dramatic from the outside. Just desert, warning signs, fencing, and distant low buildings that blended into the horizon. The real facility was underground. Tunnels, shafts, sealed sections built over decades. Some of them dated back to the earliest detonations. Others were newer, cleaner, and far more controlled. Our days started before sunrise. Equipment check, badge scan, filters issued even when yesterday's were barely used. Radios logged by serial number. No one joked. The site had a way of draining casual behavior out of people. We drove from the barracks to an access station that didn't appear on any public map. Guarded gates, biometric scans, secondary verification. Once inside, we took an elevator down. A real industrial elevator, not some modern platform. Old steel walls, peeling paint, faded radiation warnings clinging to the corners like they'd been forgotten. The elevator always smelled wrong. Not oil, not dust. Something sterile, cold, like air that had been cleaned too thoroughly. When the doors opened, we stepped into a junction where tunnels split off in multiple directions. Yellow markings on the floor. Old signs bolted to concrete walls. Some of the lights were original, dim and yellow. Others were newer, bright white, angled straight down toward the floor instead of outward. That bothered me more than I expected. Lights are supposed to help you see your surroundings. These were designed to keep your eyes lowered. Our escort detail consisted of 5 people, solid, reliable. People you trusted not to panic in tight spaces. We were assigned to protect a technical team and a Navy lieutenant acting as liaison. She was calm, precise, and careful with her words. She never volunteered information and never corrected anyone unless it affected procedure. The technical team was harder to place. They didn't wear unit patches, no names, just black and gray badges with numbers. Their equipment cases were sealed and unmarked, except for small stenciled identifiers. They moved like people who had trained together for a long time, but not like soldiers. Their posture was different. Their awareness was constant, but focused inward, not outward. Our orders were simple. Escort them along designated routes. Provide security only. No touching their equipment. No questions. No deviation. For the first 2 days, everything followed the routine. We walked the same corridors, stopped while the technical team checked panels and vents, logged times, escorted them back to the elevator and up to the surface. Nothing dramatic, just quiet work underground. But small details started to stand out. The air down there was too clean. Underground facilities always carry some trace of dust or damp stone. This place didn't. Breathing felt sharp, almost dry, like the air had been scrubbed past the point of comfort. Sometimes the floor vibrated, not continuously, just a slow, irregular pulse, not the steady hum of machinery. More like something shifting its weight far below us. I logged it the first time and assumed it was part of ventilation testing. The technical team avoided certain side tunnels. They never said why. They didn't stop us from looking, but they subtly angled their bodies away, guiding the group along a specific path. Not fear, avoidance. By the third day, I noticed that some of the tunnel signs didn't match the maps we'd been issued. Extra letters, symbols where numbers should be. When I asked the lieutenant, she told me the system had been updated years ago and not all documents reflected the changes. Her tone told me not to pursue it. One of the technical team members wore a device on his wrist. No screen, no buttons. Just a faint hum that changed pitch depending on where we stood. When the tone dropped lower, they adjusted their formation without speaking, closing ranks slightly and keeping closer to the center of the corridor. That was the first time I felt something was off in a way that wasn't procedural. Underground spaces aren't silent if you listen long enough. There's always water somewhere, distant fans, old equipment. This place had none of that, just controlled airflow and our footsteps. Near the end of the first week, we passed a maintenance panel that had been pulled open recently. Behind it, I expected wiring or pipes. Instead, I saw fresh concrete and a corridor that wasn't on any blueprint. Clean edges, new construction that didn't match the surrounding structure. The lieutenant shut it down immediately. Stay en route, no exceptions. That night, I reviewed my notes. Mismatched signage, avoided corridors, clean air, vibrations, fresh construction. It didn't feel like maintenance. It felt like containment. 2 days later, the equipment reacted. Every radio on our belts spat static at the same moment. Not interference. Synchronization. The wrist device on one of the technical team members dropped to a low hum, then went silent. The overhead lights shifted angle slightly, tightening their cones and forcing our eyes downward. The technical team didn't look surprised. One of my people told me later that he'd heard something the night before, during a late shift near the lower junctions. Not noise exactly, breathing, slow, heavy, distant. He said he thought it was air moving through old ducts until he realized the rhythm didn't match any system. I told him to keep it to himself. Fear spreads fast underground. The real confirmation came from a place that shouldn't have existed anymore. Near the entry station, there was an old terminal room that hadn't been fully cleared out. Dust on the desks, dead screens on the walls. Inside a cabinet, we found storage reels and printed logs dating back decades. Raw notes, security briefings, technical observations. The language was careful, clinical. Terms like containment stability and non-human intelligence. No speculation, no storytelling, just records. One line stayed with me. Subject reacts to human density and sustained visual attention. At that point, it stopped being a question. We weren't guarding equipment. We were guarding a prisoner. The lieutenant finally spoke to me privately after that. Not officially, no paperwork, just enough to stop me from asking the wrong questions. Whatever was down there hadn't been created. It had been found. early detonations had disturbed something deeper than expected. Attempts to remove it failed. Attempts to destroy it were abandoned, so they built around it. It wasn't hostile in the way people imagine. It was responsive, aware, and holding something else in check. The lower levels weren't part of our assignment. But one morning, the elevator didn't wait for input. The doors closed, and we started descending without anyone touching the controls. The display panel showed levels that didn't match any map, then went blank entirely. The temperature dropped fast, clean cold, dry enough to sting your throat. When the doors opened, the architecture changed completely. No concrete, no bolts, smooth surfaces, rounded corners, lights embedded in the floor instead of the ceiling, forcing your gaze downward whether you wanted it or not. The space felt wider than it should have been for how deep we were. The technical team told us to keep our eyes down. Not because it would attack, because the human brain tries to resolve shapes it isn't built to understand. That mental strain made everything worse. Through reinforced glass, I caught glimpses of something I couldn't hold in focus. Tall, narrow, then not. My mind slid off it, like it didn't want me to complete the picture. The harder I tried not to look, the more aware I became of its presence. The truth came in pieces after that. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a test subject. It was a regulator, something that existed beneath the rock long before the site. Nuclear detonations destabilized something deeper, something that would have been far worse to deal with. And this thing had been holding it back. Human presence strained it, restraints weakened it, observation aggravated it. The more we watched, the less stable everything became. The choice wasn't whether to free it, it was whether to stop choking it. Once the restraints began to fail, everything changed faster than anyone expected. The vibrations underfoot didn't grow stronger. They became deliberate, slower, heavier, like something adjusting itself with care instead of reacting blindly. The technical team stopped pretending this was routine. Their movements tightened. Their spacing changed. One of them checked the wrist device every few seconds now. The hum coming from it wasn't erratic anymore. It was steady, almost rhythmic, like it had locked onto something. The lieutenant didn't give orders for a while. She watched, hands clasped behind her back, jaw tight. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. "Reduce numbers below," she said. "Surface rotation. Immediately." I didn't argue. I sent 2 of my people topside with a routine excuse. The moment they left, the air eased slightly. Not warmer, not cleaner, just less tight. The wrist device reflected it immediately. The hum softened. That was when it clicked for me. It wasn't reacting to us individually. It was reacting to density, to presence, to attention. We were the variable. Over the next 2 days, we operated with reduced personnel underground. The vibrations became less frequent. The technical team relaxed just enough to breathe normally. The lieutenant stopped watching the floor, like she expected it to split open. That didn't mean the problem was solved. It meant we were buying time. I sent a message up the chain, not emotional, not accusatory, just factual. Containment instability correlated with human presence. Request clarification on threat profile. The response came back stripped of detail. Maintain distance. Avoid direct observation. Continue supporting technical team. That told me everything I needed to know. They didn't want us understanding it. They wanted us following patterns. The next escalation didn't come with alarms. It came with an elevator call. We were standing near the lower junction when the elevator chimed. None of us had touched it. The doors slid open on their own. The display panel didn't show a number, just a symbol I hadn't seen before, the same one from the altered tunnel signs. The technical team froze. One of them whispered, barely audible, "It's ready." The lieutenant didn't deny it. "That level isn't scheduled," I said. "It isn't scheduled," she replied, "but it's necessary." Necessary wasn't reassuring. We ran checks, gear secured, weapons holstered. No one was supposed to draw anything down there, not because it wouldn't work, but because it would make things worse. Everyone knew it, even if no one said it. The elevator descended smoother than any mechanical system I'd ever been on. No vibration, no rattle, just motion, guided, controlled. The temperature dropped fast, clean cold, the kind that dries your mouth and tightens your chest without triggering panic. My breath fogged briefly, then vanished as if the air absorbed it. When the doors opened, we stepped into a space that didn't feel built. It felt shaped. The walls curved inward and outward without pattern. The floor was seamless, marked only by faint embedded lines that guided movement without explaining why. Lights ran along the edges, keeping our eyes low. The technical team took the lead. The lieutenant followed. We formed a tight perimeter without being told. No one spoke. At the far end of the chamber, behind reinforced glass, something shifted. I didn't look directly. I couldn't. Every time my eyes tried to settle on it, my mind slid away, like trying to remember a face you never quite saw. The shape refused to resolve. Tall, narrow, then broad, then nothing my brain wanted to keep. The pressure in the air increased. Not painful, present, like standing near something massive that hadn't decided whether you mattered yet. The technical team set up equipment that didn't look medical. Rods, anchors, interfaces built to interact with the structure itself, not what was inside it. The wrist device hummed in sync with the vibrations now. The lieutenant finally told me the part I was never meant to hear. "It isn't restrained because it's dangerous," she said quietly. "It's restrained because we panicked." That tracked. Early detonations had cracked deeper layers of rock, opened spaces no one had charted, exposed something that wasn't meant to be exposed, something that regulated pressure, movement, balance far below the surface. They didn't find a monster. They found a mechanism they didn't understand. When they tried to remove it, things got worse. Structural failures, unexplained shifts, near collapses. So they did what humans always do when they're scared and powerful. They locked it in place and called it containment. The problem was, it wasn't a prisoner. It was a plug. The restraints weren't failing because of age. They were failing because the thing they held was no longer willing to compensate for our mistakes. The technical team confirmed it with their readings. Pressure below was rising again, not explosively, gradually, patiently. The choice wasn't theoretical anymore. If the restraints held, something deeper would break through them eventually. If they didn't, the system might stabilize on its own. The lieutenant looked at me. For the first time, she didn't look like an officer managing risk. She looked like someone accepting responsibility. "Once we start withdrawal," she said, "there's no putting it back the way it was." I nodded. Wasn't working anyway. The technical team moved quickly. They disengaged the first set of anchors. Nothing dramatic happened. The vibration changed tone, lower, steadier, like a heartbeat finding rhythm. They pulled the second set. The air pressure shifted. My ears popped slightly. The lights dimmed, then stabilized at a lower level. I felt something then. Not fear, recognition, like being noticed without being targeted. The final restraint came free. The chamber responded immediately. The embedded lines in the floor brightened faintly. The glass vibrated, not violently, just enough to remind us it was there. The shape behind it moved. Not toward us, away, deeper, downward into a space the lights didn't reach. The pressure eased. The vibration settled into a faint, constant pulse that felt satisfied. No alarms, no collapse, no rupture, just equilibrium. The technical team didn't celebrate. They packed their equipment fast, like people who knew better than to linger. The lieutenant ordered a full withdrawal. No delay. As we backed out, I glanced down the chamber one last time, without lifting my head. I didn't see it. I felt it, present, occupied, holding something else where it belonged. The elevator took us back up without incident. The ride felt ordinary, mechanical, almost disappointing. At the surface, nothing had changed. Same guards, same procedures, same desert stretching out under the sun, like nothing beneath it mattered. We filed reports, routine language, procedural summaries. No speculation. Mine came back the next morning missing pages. Clean removal. No explanation. The technical team vanished from the logs entirely. Their badges stopped registering. Their rooms were cleared within hours. Within a week, cement trucks arrived. The lower access tunnel was sealed under layers of concrete, thick enough to bury the truth permanently. New signage went up. Unstable. No entry. That wasn't true. It was stable for the first time in decades. My team rotated out quietly. No debriefs, no counseling. Just reassignment, like nothing unusual had happened. At night, sleep came light. Not with nightmares, with awareness, that clean air, that downward light, that sense of pressure being held back by something patient and old. Months later, I drove past the range on a long route west, stopped at an overlook. The desert looked empty, dead, harmless. I felt the pulse anyway, faint, steady, deep under the rock. Not threatening, working. I stayed only a moment. Didn't stare, didn't linger. Some things don't want witnesses. Some things don't need us watching to do their job. And I learned not to look too hard at anything that's been holding the ground together longer than we've been standing on it.